Mason, can you believe we've been at this for a year?
Yes, time flies when you're having fun.
This has been a lot of fun. We've had some great conversations.
And we've had some awesome guests.
So my question is, have we combobulated photography yet?
Not even close.
"23 episodes in, and we are just getting started."
You and I have so much to talk about. Today I want to go back to where we started.
Oh, you mean college?
No, not that far back. Good heavens. I want to talk about why we're photographers.
Well, again, it's not for the money, that's for sure.
Nope, we do it because we love it.
So today we're celebrating 1 year of Photocombobulate by checking focus.
Yeah, we're going to drill down on the joy of photography. I'm Mason Marsh.
And I'm Jeff Carlson. Let's do this. Okay, Mason, joy. Now, joy is like one of those really short but loaded words. And
So loaded.
you say joy of photography, and God, that can mean so many things. I mean, talk about needing to combobulate something. Joy, like, oh, hey, do you like taking pictures? Yeah, it gives me great joy. Well, what about it? And like, it almost seems like too big of a topic. And yet in, discussions that you and I have had and discussions that we have with other photographers and on workshops, it really kind of circles this whole idea of, why are you doing this? Like, what do you get out of photography? Because photography, unless you are a professional photographer shooting day in, day out for specific things, it's not necessarily a needed thing to do. It's not something that people even can get into easily. So like, why? What's the point?
Exactly. And this is a question that every photographer, professional, novice, doesn't matter. Every photographer should ask this question all the time. Why? Why am I doing this? What about this process of making photographs is important to me, brings me joy? What's my drive, right? What's the motivation?
Well, there are definitely times when I've been out shooting and I ask myself, why am I doing this?
Why, right? We've all been there, right? And those
I've been up
are,
since 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm hot and I'm tired. Why?
when you stop asking this question, you're in dangerous territory because you're just doing it out of habit at that point, right?
Yeah.
So we're here to kind of celebrate a year of this podcast by coming back to where we started. When we started talking about why we got into photography, why we wanted to start this podcast. And it's a message that we've hit on in almost every episode, even if they weren't directly about photography.
Yeah.
They were things that sort of answer this question, like why? Why are we out here doing this? And I know why I love photography. I know why it brings me joy. And I know that answer changes almost every time I ask the question.
Yeah.
So it's totally discombobulated.
Well, I mean, like it's such a loaded term. It's such a loaded question. And of course, like that can apply to, like, why do you go bowling? Why do you play tennis? Why do you, do all sorts of things? Neither of which I do. Although I used to bowl, but that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
You know, but like why pick something like photography, which is complicated? It is expensive. It can be expensive. It can be extremely frustrating. It takes up a lot of time. You have to go through a pretty significant learning curve, and I mean, depending on all sorts of factors.
Sure.
It involves transportation. It involves like there's so much to it.
And not once has anyone ever yelled out anywhere near me, is anyone here a photographer? Right? It's not like the world is screaming for more photographers. So why do we do it? Right?
Yeah, you're never on a plane when
Yeah.
there's suddenly a photographic emergency that comes
Yes.
up. Is anybody
Ladies and
here a
gentlemen, are any
photographer?
of you photographers? Yes. Yes, it never
Desperately
happens.
need a shot. Oh my God.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
the reason I wanted to talk about this again, Jeff, is because I deal a lot with people who are learning photography, and
Hmm.
both of us write about photography and getting better at photography, and obviously we do this podcast too. So the subject comes up a lot. How do we get better? How do we do better at this photography craft and this art that we're taking on? And all the time that I'm teaching photography, it's always forefront in my mind that I don't know what makes a great photograph a great photograph. And so the product
Hmm.
of the process that we're talking about is completely subjective.
Yes.
And so when you're talking about why do we do photography, if the answer is because I want to be really good at it, then you have to ask, well, what does that mean? What's good? What's
Yeah.
good photography? Because some of the most famous photographs ever are really technically awful, right?
Hmm.
Or, maybe compositionally, they break all the
Yeah.
guidelines, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They're
So,
blurry. Yeah.
yeah.
Whatever.
So, to answer this question, why do we do it? What brings us joy in photography? I think we need to start with the answer and work backwards. And the answer needs to be because.
Wow. You've cracked it. We've solved it all.
We're always bringing clarity. Always bringing clarity is our goal, right? Always
I
bringing
I
clarity.
can tell that you're a dad. Why? Because the answer is
Because
because. Just
because
listen to
it's
me and do what I tell you.
because I don't know the right answer.
I'm sorry. Please elaborate on because.
Because it's personal. I think
Ah,
photography as a process, unless you're a professional and a client is saying, I want your photo to look like this. Right? I want the photo that you take for me to look like this. In that case, you're building a product that to specifications that someone is giving you. But
yeah.
if you're out with a camera on your own, doing it for yourself, then only you knows why and what you want. And only you can answer the question is whether or not it's good. And it drives me crazy when photographers and they don't even have to be photographers. It could be just anybody says, well, that's not a good photo. And
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
was a newspaper photographer, I used to get this every now and then. An editor would say this to me. That's not the photo I had in mind. And I would say, when you sent me out, if you had a photo in mind, that was your chance to tell me what you wanted.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah,
tell
yeah,
me, so
definitely.
I got you what I thought was best.
Hmm.
So in this process, it's highly personal. It's highly emotional, right? I think photography is an emotional experience. It's you're trying to be good at something. You're trying something that's technically difficult and artistically challenging,
Hmm.
and conditions may not be the best. Conditions may be really hard, uncomfortable. We talk a lot about this in the podcast. Yeah, how do you dress
Yeah.
for outdoor photography and that sorts of things? So, in all of these situations, we're looking for something when we start making that photograph. We're looking for something, and only we know what that something is.
Yes, yes. And this is a topic that I swear it threatens to go off in 15 different directions at once. So if I do that, reel me in. But,
Okay.
like one of the first things that I thought of when you said that was, like already you're bringing the expectation that the photograph is is the result.
Hmm.
That, like to be a photographer is to create a good photograph. And so how do you create that good photograph? And there's a whole line of techniques and experiences and gear and all that to make that good photograph. But
Right.
then again, that might be a good photograph, and somebody else will say, no, no, actually it's really not. Like that
Hmm.
might be the best photograph you have ever taken, and somebody might say, you know what, it's it's good, it's fine. And
Or they might say it's crap.
they might say it's crap, or something else that happens sometimes is you may think it's fine, right? and somebody else might just really key into it for some reason.
Hmm.
You know, and you find yourself wondering, you know, why did someone buy a print of this image where clearly this other one that I made is much better for 5 or 10 different reasons, or because I
Yep.
just liked it a lot better. I'm reminded of I don't even think I could find it to put in the show notes, but I remember hearing a podcast where they were talking to somebody who had been very successful at selling prints. You know, he built up like a small business. He would have the the little tent and everything that he would take to
Mm.
different shows and
Yep.
fairs and be able to you know, just knock it out of the park and come home selling almost everything there. You know, which, like, stop me right there. That sounds great. Like, you are making art. You are you know, doing something at a sufficiently technical and artistic level that other people appreciate it. You're making prints. You're selling photos, making a living. Like, all these things that we talk about uh, are sort of inherent in being a photographer. And yet, at one point, he kind of admitted, he's like, I don't really love the photos, but I know what sells.
Hmm.
And so the things that that brought him joy were things that he knew wouldn't sell. And so he would go to, you know, these places in Oregon and, you know, that other people have gone to, but he knows that, you know, like people in Oregon will buy pictures from, you know, Oregon landmarks. And
Right.
I'm just throwing Oregon in there just because you have that awesome, I think that's an Oregon hat. No, maybe that's a California
This
hat.
is a California hat.
Okay, well,
For those people
because you
listening to
live
the
in Oregon, I'm
podcast,
just,
it's a,
you know,
yeah.
I'm just kind of throwing that out. But, you know, like he knew that these are the things that people would buy. And so
Hmm.
of course he shot that because, you know, he has a family to feed and he has bills to pay and all of that. But you could tell he wasn't really enjoying it. And every once in a while he would get out and do something that he really liked,
Hmm.
knowing that those photos would not, you know, go with the rest of them and
Yeah,
be
those
quote
weren't
unquote
commercially successful photos, but they were
exactly, they
personally
would be quote
successful.
unquote successful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. That just reminded me. I think I remember the interview you're talking about, but when we were in Banff earlier this summer, my family and I went to the Canadian Rockies, and we were in Banff, and there's a gallery there by a nature photographer. I don't remember his name. Absolutely amazing wildlife photographer, and to have a gallery on Main Street in Banff, you have to sell a lot of prints, right? So I'm sure
Yeah.
he's doing fine. One big print in that gallery just jumped out at me, and it was clearly in a place of honor. So it was a successful photo for him, and it was a picture of an abandoned car way out in the middle of somewhere in the woods. And there was a raccoon looking through the windshield. There's like a hole in the windshield, and this raccoon was sticking its head through the hole, looking right at the camera.
Yeah.
And it was a brilliant photo. It's not one I've ever seen anything like it. That photo was in that gallery in about 10 different formats, right? You could buy the giant one, you could buy the little prints, you could buy cards, you can do all these different things.
Yeah.
He probably had 600 other photos in that gallery, but all of the other ones were normal wildlife
Hmm.
photography. They were beautiful, right? They're stunning. But that one really connected with me because it was fun, it was whimsical, it was technically well done, and it was
Unusual.
unusual. It was unusual. And the guy who was working in the gallery wasn't the photographer, it was this person working in there, said, "Oh, yeah, that's one of his most famous photos. He had found that car, and that raccoon was living in that car, and he would come by that car on hikes, and he would stop and he would see if the raccoon was doing anything that was photogenic, and one day the raccoon popped his head out of that hole." So the story tells me that this photographer knew that if he could get the right conditions and get the right subject matter, that that would be a winning photograph.
Hmm.
But it was work to get it. It wasn't like he just was walking by there one day and the raccoon popped its head out and was like, "Hi, take my photo." And this guy was
Yeah.
like, "Serendipity," and he snapped this very lucrative shot for him. He had to return to that spot over and over and work that scene until he got what he was hoping for. And that to me, maybe he felt great joy there because that was big effort and challenge to make that photo. And the fact that people love it must bring him joy as well as money, which can
Hmm.
bring joy
Hmm.
too.
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount of factors and come into play, I think, for photographers. Number one, was it hard? Right? Because if it's easy, go back to our one of our earliest episodes, we talked about flow state. You can't achieve flow state unless there's a significant amount of challenge involved. So I think for photography to be joyful experience, it needs to be difficult, which means you have to be trying things that are hard for you to do.
Hmm.
The second thing is it has to be something that you can't just go out and do any day. There has to be a certain amount of luck involved. And I think for me, weather is a big part of that. As an outdoor photographer, it's like, am I going to get lucky with the sunset tonight? Am I going to get lucky with the sunrise? I think another aspect of this needs to be the fact that the photograph that you eventually create brings joy and happiness to other people. And I say this a lot to my students and to people who listen to this podcast. I'm sure I've said it before. If no one else likes your photo, that's fine.
Hmm.
But if someone likes your photo, that does bring you joy. There is an endorphin hit that happens there. I mean, it's undeniable. So when you post that on social media and people like it, it's affirmation that what you were taking your time to do was worth your time.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things, right, that we can use as a rubric for determining what should be bringing us joy, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that almost crosses into the idea that, oh, well, you got to suffer for your art, right? Like, well, your photos aren't really good because uh you didn't put in enough time. You didn't go you didn't trek far enough off the road to get this shot. Like there's some of that, but I I say that knowing at the same time that most of the time nobody knows how far you trekked unless
No.
that's part of the story of the photo.
Right.
If it's, really clear that you went on a 50-mile hike through the woods and you found something that nobody gets to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, that may be unique, but it also may be like that's something that you write about when you post it or in the little placard that goes next to it if it's shown in a gallery,
Sure.
like that storiness of it, because we know that there are all sorts of other times when you can get a fantastic shot sitting in the front seat of your car. Just make sure you roll down the
Just
window,
roll down
right?
the window and take that shot. Yeah,
because
I
because like every once in a while there is that serendipity,
mm-hmm.
and you have to, again, I feel like I'm going in too many directions here, but you also have to like figure out, okay, I got this serendipitous shot. Now, is that because I'm really good? Is that because I'm really lucky? Or, do people love this and therefore that's bringing me joy that people love this, but nobody knows that it's was so easy to get, and therefore the next time that I expect something to be so easy and then it's not, oh man, like what happened to me? you
Right.
know
Right. I
maybe
I
maybe I'm
think
just like surfacing all of my insecurities about being a
it's
photographer here.
well, like I said, it's an emotional thing. This is a highly personal
Yeah.
emotional thing. And as a photographer, I'm always questioning myself, right? I'm my worst critic.
Oh
And
yeah.
when I can satisfy
No, 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 no,
myself,
I'm your worst critic, don't
you're
worry.
my okay, you're my worst critic.
Sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
No, that's fine. If you can satisfy yourself, then you've accomplished something, right? If you're your worst critic. And that's why I think it's really dangerous that you put all of your joy, if all of your joy of photography is dependent on whether or not somebody else likes your photos, then you're working for them, right? And
Mhm.
that is where you're gonna be like, well, geez, everybody loves pictures of kittens, and so I can't. I'm allergic to cats. I can't stand cats, but by God, I'm gonna take a lot of cat photos. That that's not gonna bring you joy on any level except for the fact that people love it,
Mhm.
right? What I'm gonna argue is that if you can find joy because you've met lots of different things that you were looking for when you picked up that camera. Like I'll go back through the list I've started creating so far. People like it. It was hard to get. You
You have a sense of
accomplished it.
achievement.
Yeah, it was an achievement. You accomplished a technical achievement. There was some luck involved that worked out for you. You know, that serendipity thing. I'll add one more to that, and that is the gear part, right? I am not afraid, and I'm not ashamed to say this. Buying camera gear, putting it in a bag, putting it over my shoulder, just that part brings me joy. I like camera
Ah,
gear.
uh-huh,
I
uh-huh.
like camera gear enough that even if I didn't use it, obtaining it and having it and looking at it and cleaning it and putting it in a bag would bring me a certain measure of joy. Now I get to add that to all these other things when I go out and use the camera gear, right?
Yeah.
But there's a component there too. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast is gear. And
Hmm.
oftentimes what'll come up in the discussion is, but it's not about gear. And it's like, yeah, sometimes it is. That's a part
Yeah.
of it. It's an undeniable part of it for a lot of photographers is we love the gadgetry, the technical side of it. So there's another little token we can put on the pile of
Hmm.
coins that we're creating here.
Well, I mean, that also leads to the idea of satisfaction
Hmm.
because again, I feel like we're going through all of our greatest hits, but like we've talked about satisfaction before, and you know, like sort of the biggest satisfaction is you get a good photo and you know it's a good photo, or maybe that's just me. Like that gives me a great amount of satisfaction.
So
But
say that again.
okay, so you capture a good photo and you know it's a good photo.
So the instant you took it, you
The
know it,
instant you
you
took it,
you
you
know
know
you nailed it.
there's something special about it. And it gets followed up when you're reviewing it later and you realize, oh yeah, that did turn out as good as I liked. I mean,
Hmm.
I think some of my favorite shots of the last few years were ones where at the moment I took it, I said this one's going to be something special. And it turned out that they were. Now there are also many times when I said, "Oh, you know what? I nailed this. This is the one." And then I go back and I look at it and I'm like, actually, it really isn't. So, there's always two sides of that. But absolutely having the satisfaction of, you know what, I just got a brand new camera and I get to learn everything about it. And it's different enough from my old camera or it has new features that I've never tried before. I mean, that in itself, you're right, has its own satisfaction. And for some
Hmm.
people, they don't want to have to deal with that. And for them, they grab their iPhone and the iPhone takes a really good shot and they don't have to know all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's also satisfaction.
Yeah. If you get no joy from buying gear and carrying gear around, don't buy more gear. It's not going to be part of the fun of making photographs for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've one of the things that I mentioned when we were first talking about the idea of this episode is I brought up the topic of golf. And a lot of
Oh,
people
golf.
take up
Yes.
golf, hitting that little white ball with those clubs, right? A lot of people take up golf for the same reasons that people take up photography. It gets you outside,
Hmm.
trying something that's challenging. You're not instantly good at golf. The second you pick up a club, nobody's great at golf right away. So it
No.
takes practice. It takes there's certain rules, right? You got to hit the ball into the cup. You don't just smack it off into the woods, right? So it is similar to photography. And when I started playing golf, I was a newspaper photographer the first time I played golf. And I went out with some friends and I couldn't afford a full set of clubs. So I went to the thrift store and bought like two clubs, a putter and I think a 3 iron or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And I showed up at the golf course and I had these two, like $10 clubs. And the one I wasn't using, I would just throw it on the ground. And this guy that I was golfing with was like, man, you got to treat your clubs better than that. Clubs are expensive and all that. And I'm like, I don't care about these clubs. And so for me at that point, it wasn't about the gear at all. I was just having fun learning golf.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, obviously, if I'd continued to play golf, which I didn't, but if I'd continued to play on the regular, eventually I'd be like, well, I want to assemble a set of clubs and have a nice bag to keep them in, and I want to polish them, and I want them to look nice, and I want them to stay straight, so when I hit a ball, it doesn't, the club doesn't fall apart. That part of that process might be really fun for me, learning about clubs and learning about all of that. And so I think it depends on what stage you're in photography and learning photography, what brings you joy in that process. Now, to go back what you were just saying, because we're circling all around this.
Oh,
We're
this
serpentine,
is going to
right?
be so many loops and circles. Yeah.
Yeah, are you following us, folks?
I'm thinking right now, I'm like, I've already put a pin in something that you said. So go ahead with yours
Okay.
and then I'll go back
So what
to
I'm going to
that.
circle around to is the more you practice something and the better you get at it, the harder it is for you to be satisfied for what you're doing. So to go back to the golf analogy,
Mhm.
if I go out and play a round of golf and I hit the same score that I hit the first time I played golf, I'm probably not going to be happy
Mhm.
because now I've invested all this money in gear. I've invested all this time in learning this. I've invested all this time practicing. And then maybe there's people watching and they're like, this guy golfs every week and this is how bad he is, right? So there's all of this stuff, right? My expectations for my craft are going to go up the more I do it. And I think that's one of the things about photography that brings me so much joy is I always have more to learn
Mhm.
and I always have something I can improve. But I've come a long way so I can look back and look at my early photos and say, wow, I've really progressed. And that brings me a great deal of satisfaction. I really, for me, and we mentioned intrinsic motivation. We talked about flow state, right? Intrinsic motivation is what keeps you doing something, even if no one's telling you to keep doing it, right?
Mhm.
What keeps me doing something like photography, which is challenging and expensive and all of that, is that I really want to be good at it. There's so many things I do in my world that I'm not good at. This is one thing where it's like every time I go out and do it, I want to say, yeah, I'm better than most people at this.
Yeah.
And that brings me a certain amount of satisfaction.
Hmm. Well, and okay, let's put you and I together because you've been a photographer a lot longer than I have, and I would say objectively, you are a better photographer than I am. And so when
I'm
I,
not going to.
you're like, yes, yes, I am.
Well,
No,
I'm
no,
going
no,
to
but
put a pin in that and come back around to it. So
yeah,
go
okay,
ahead.
okay, 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 okay. But and so what that makes me think is that whole idea of how much you've accomplished, how satisfied you are, because in one sense, like when I'm out shooting with you, when we were in the Sierra Nevadas, we were shooting some night shots, and your photos were just coming out much better than mine. And there were a lot of reasons for that. One
Hmm.
was because of your experience. Two was because of your gear. You had a better camera that was a full frame versus my crop sensor that got more light, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and so I saw that, and my thought was, okay, well, I want to get up to that level. I want to be as good as Mason is at this part. But for you, you've already reached that part. And so you're looking up ahead and saying, oh, you know what? I want to be as good as, Bob or, somebody that you know. And there's that sense of always getting better. Like
Hmm.
there's always somebody better than you. And and that's something that you have to embrace and you have to accept and you have to look for because you know me as a photographer going out and doing photography with you has made me a better photographer, and I'm sure that you could say that with a number of other people that you've shot with, or the experience you had as a photojournalist. So like that sense of joy, it doesn't mean that okay, I have found my joy and I've reached my pinnacle. Like that's just not the case, and that's okay.
Right. So, Jeff, what you just said, I want to go back to our golf analogy.
Hmm.
If you golf by yourself, which I don't know too many people that do that, but if you go out and golf by yourself and you're not golfing with other people, and you're not competing, right? You're not doing golf tournaments or anything like that. You would never know, other than your score and other than your own feedback, you wouldn't know how you're doing as a golfer. And I think that when we go out as groups in photography and we take photographs together, I think it's a very valuable exercise because you get to see how other people approach a scene. And one of the things I love about doing workshops, and someday I want to get back to that, is you could be out with the most novice photographer in the world and they see something completely different than you and they take a different approach at it, and it's an innovative approach.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, I'm gonna steal that, right? So much of what we do is theft because we're looking at what other people are doing. We're like, I'm gonna try that. I'm just gonna put my own little tweak on that. So I think there's some value in taking photographs of other people and kind of looking over their shoulder and looking at their photos later and being like, wow, they really saw something that I didn't see, or they tried a technique that I hadn't considered. But really, when I said I wanted to put a pin in what you were saying, the reason I wanted to say that is I may be more experienced photographer, but that doesn't mean I'm a better photographer because the photograph is so subjective. I just have to keep coming back to this. I think it was Karen Hutton, another great photographer that I've met, who said this once. People don't buy art, they buy the artist. And I think that that applies a lot to photography. Most of the photography that I consume, day to day on my iPad or on my computer when I'm looking through social media or wherever, most of the photography I consume is from people that I know or met or somehow got exposed to.
Yeah.
And I made a connection with that photographer at some point. Maybe they commented on a photo I made and I'm like, I'll follow you back and we'll mutually appreciate each other, right?
Yeah.
There's an investment in that photographer, so there's an investment in their photos. And so you're more inclined to be like, I like that photo because I like that photographer.
Hmm.
So for me, if someone says you're a better photographer than me, I'm like, who says? You think I'm better, but there's no scale that fits. And I've heard people say this, did you come back from that trip with any good photos?
Yes.
Or people say this when you're out taking photos, are you getting any good photos?
Hmm.
Yeah, every time. Are they good enough for you? I don't know. I don't really care, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless that part of my joy is so much weighted towards what other people think. If that's the thing I'm going for, then it's important. Otherwise, there's all these other things in play. And so I don't really like this idea of better photographer. I've got more years making photos, but
Hmm.
that also means I might have more bad habits. And there's been times where you and I've been out photographing and you'll do something and I'll be like, I didn't even think of that because I'm in a rut. I
Yeah.
do the same
Yeah.
thing every time that I see that. I go, I'm going to do that. And, I do this on workshops a lot. Look over the shoulder of a student and they're like, wow, I just want to figure out how to do this. I'm like, I think you did. Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know how you got there, but it's awesome.
Hmm.
And they're like, I don't really like it. And like, well, then do what you think is going to make you better. But when we're talking about the joy of photography, this is a personal emotional thing,
Hmm.
and it cannot be put on a scale because what makes a great photo is different for everybody,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy when people say, are you getting any good photos? Like, well, you know, I think so. I'm having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I out here to make a ton of money? No, no, I'm not. So yeah, it's just crazy.
Empirically, I have a good camera, therefore I am getting a lot of good photos.
Yeah.
But
My iPhone takes
that's
great
not it.
photos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, and it's not like fishing. It's not like, somebody can say, "Hey, are you getting a lot of fish?" You can say, "Yes, I have 12 fish."
It's not like golf.
And it's
Like
not
I
like
got to the hole in 4 shots. So I'm better than
exactly,
the person who got there in 14 shots, right? It's
exactly,
not the
exactly.
same.
I'm
right?
still using the same golf ball that I started with. Yeah, yeah.
That's a good.
I also golfed when I was much younger, and it was an exercise. No, I take that back. I really enjoyed it, and at some point, I did not. Like
Right.
it became an exercise in frustration, and then that was it. Um,
Well, and I think photography is that way for some folks, right?
oh my gosh, right,
Yeah.
right. Well, okay. So now to go back to the pin that I was going to say, because
Good.
this also deals with satisfaction and your self satisfaction, and one of the things about photography is there's lots of rules and structure to it, right?
Yeah.
And for some people that's great. And for some people they're like, yeah, you know what? I am just going to take like a little tiny body and a 50 millimeter lens and go shoot all my landscape photos with that. And landscape photographers would be like, no, you got to have something much wider, and you also have to have a telephoto, and you have to have all these options. And you know what? For some people, they just nail that, and that's super great. The thing that you mentioned was the golfer who was like, you got to take care of your gear better than that. You got to have, you know, a good case for it. And that so reminded me of so many people who are there not really to make photos. They are there because, you know, the negative spin on this would be they are there to tell other people how to do things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
These be
or
mansplainers
some of that,
often.
photo splainers. Oh no, wait, they're all men. Um, but
Almost
uh,
always.
so that's kind of the negative spin. The positive spin is, you know, somebody who is really concerned about the gear, and for them it's transporting it and taking care of your gear and making sure you're using it correctly, because here is this device that has been made for you that is complicated, and how can you abuse it by taking a bad shot with it,
Mm-hmm.
like that kind of mindset. So I guess maybe that is also the negative spin on it. But what I'm getting at is you also have to navigate your own personal joy, but also like not letting other people detract from that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
again, with photography, which is also sort of like golf, um, you absolutely can do it solo. And many times, you know, it's you or I out alone in the morning, or you're taking a walk, or you know, like it can
Mhm.
be a very solo activity,
Yeah.
but it can also be a very communi- community based activity,
Hmm.
whether that's you're out shooting with a bunch of people, which I had no idea the joy of shooting with a group of people until I actually started to do it. You know, going on photo walks, like that always just kind of made me feel kind of weird, because oh my god, like here I am in competition with all these people.
Right.
And you know, the reality is you're not.
You're not.
Or you know, you don't have to be. Some people, that competition, that's what they really live for. But you know, like leave him a block behind, right?
Right. Well,
Um,
let's drill down on this, because I think a lot of people's satisfaction, a lot of people's joy comes from the feedback they get from other photographers. And so
yes.
I do want to spend a little time on this, because there's a good and bad. There's good and bad on this, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay positive. But let's take the photo walk as a great scenario.
Okay.
If you've never done a photo walk, you should do a photo walk. And I think the Scott Kelby photo walk is actually coming up very soon. I
Ah,
Google that, but photo walks happen on a regular basis in most places, and there are camera clubs that do them. There are camera stores that host them. Sometimes they're a date-driven thing, like the Scott Kelby Global
yeah.
Photo Walk. But
And and for anybody who doesn't know, explain what a photo walk is. Just
so a photo walk is an organized event where you have a starting point and a stopping point. Usually it's in a town or a city, and you're going to be walking along someplace where lots of great photo opportunities exist, right? You're not going to photo walk in a suburb probably, but you're going to, you know, here in Portland, all the photo walks seem to happen right along the river in downtown. So
yeah.
they almost always start in a place where it's easy to find parking, and they end at a bar. because a big part of photo walking is this social tribal. I'm going to say tribal because I think that's the best word to describe it. There's something about taking photographs of other people and then talking about photography with other people that's affirming. And it doesn't matter what you love to do, whether it's golf or photography or whatever, hanging out with other people who do that and having that shared experience is something that is very powerful for us as humans. We're social animals. And so that makes total sense. So with the photo walk, the photography is such a small portion of it. You're walking along with other people. A lot of times I'll see people on photo walks. I don't ever see them take a photo, right? It's just
Yeah.
for them. It's about hanging out with other photographers. For some people, it's about, hey, I'm here to take photos. Don't talk to me, right? So you get the full spectrum. I really enjoy them because you get to see what people stop, what catches their eye. They'll stop and they'll make photos, and you're like, wow, I've never stopped there and do that. But that is a great idea. I want to put that in my pocket. The last photo walk I did, there was a person that had a glass sphere,
Oh
a
yeah.
crystal sphere, and they kept taking photos through this. And at first I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then after a while, I'm like, all your photos are this, this is your thing.
Yeah.
Good for you, right? And I was totally judgy there. But that brings me to this point. Whenever you're around other photographers, you're going to get the bump of being in a tribe with like minded people, but you're also going to get the feedback of people who don't feel good about themselves unless they can make other people feel bad about themselves.
Yeah.
And those folks really, they exist in all areas of influence, right? Golf, I'm sure, is horrible for this. But I've encountered this so many times. Camera clubs are really rich environments for these types of people where you get to say to other people, your photography sucks because you don't do it like me.
Hmm.
And my photography is great because I do it like this photographer that I bought a book of years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
If you don't shoot like Ansel Adams, you're crap. And I think that's really dangerous. You've got to learn in photography, you've got to learn to listen to your inner voice as much as you listen to those outer voices. And if they're counter to each other, if they're not reinforcing what the others are saying, then you need to choose one that's going to be the one that you listen to. And
Yeah.
if that voice is negative and it's telling you that you're not doing something right, you got to ask yourself, is there value to this? Is there something I can learn? And if it's just this person stroking their ego, then walk away. That's one of the great things about a photo walk is there's usually a whole line of people and you don't have to stay with the same people.
The photo walk away. Yes.
Yes, walk away.
Walk away. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. I I do find again I'm relying a lot on experiences dealing with people that I've had in workshops and classes
Hmm.
telling me
Hmm.
stories about I'm in a camera club and I enter the monthly photo competition and this is what I was told. And usually it's something along the lines of you violated these rules of photography, therefore your photos suck. And
Hmm.
I always have to say to that, wow, where did that person get off saying that? Because there's absolutely no set rules in photography
Yeah.
other than you have to capture some light with some device.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
only real rule of photography is you have to capture some light somewhere.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I find myself so quite often, I don't know, on Facebook, I'm a member of, half a dozen photo groups, and
Mhm.
I don't really post very much there. Um, but like every once in a while, I'll, come across a picture, and my first reaction is, "Oh my God!" Like they've created an HDR image, and it is
Mhm.
so egregious. Like shadows don't make any sense. Everything looks sort of puffy, and they're putting this out there as, wow, look at this thing that I've made.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest, like my first thought is, oh, dude, you have overcooked that. But does it help me to say that?
Does it
No.
make you better?
Does it make me better? Not at all. Does Would it make me feel better? No.
Mhm.
And so, like, it's a great lesson in, like, here's somebody who either A is just learning, right? I
Hmm.
mean, I I can't say, oh, I've never overcooked an HDR image. I mean, come on, you know.
I cooked a bunch last week that look awful. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, so, here's a person that's just learning, or this could be a person who really loves the look of that effect. They're not trying to make it an accurate depiction or even a dramatic depiction of the light at the time. They're not trying to emulate, what people think is currently in terms of photography. They took that image and they edited it and they spent some time with it and they thought this looks good.
Yeah.
And you know what? Great.
Good for
And
them.
and
Yeah.
and maybe they will see other examples and then decide that, oh, you know what? I don't have to completely go crazy with this. But even then, I am expecting them to, fall in line with what my expectation is. And, that's not cool. And so
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything about it unless maybe, you're in an environment that is a specific photo critique, right?
Right.
When you're you're going to somebody and you're expecting that sort of critique, but that's like a whole entirely other thing, right?
That is a special case that is, and some people are always posting images with that expectation that they're going to get critiqued,
Yeah.
and it needs to be made clear that I'm looking for, and there's photo groups for that on Facebook.
Hmm.
I can't remember the name of the one that I'm in, but it's, you know, I'm going to post a photo with the understanding that your job as a viewer of that photo is to make comments on it.
Yeah.
I do a lot of critiques in my classes. It's an important part of, I think, photography education is having people present an image that they have questions about, and then you tell them what's working and what's not working. The first question I always ask when I'm looking at a photo that I'm going to critique is, what was your intention in making this photo? What were you going for is usually how I say that. What were you going for when you got up that morning, you walked outside, you were staying at this beautiful bed and breakfast on this bay, and the sun was coming up and it was hitting the water. What were you trying to do with your camera in that moment? And they'll say, "Oh, I was see the way the sun was hitting the water. I really like that. And then there was a bird, and it was like a silhouette of the bird, and I wanted to capture that. And like, oh, I didn't see the bird until you mentioned it. Now I see the bird. That's cool. But
Hmm.
as the viewer of the photo, that was not an obvious element. So if that was your intention, was to draw, to draw that bird into focus and present it as a, an image, you missed it. You missed that part. And so I think a great way to critique is start from a position of meet them where they're at, see what they were going for, and then tell them whether or not they made it. And you do it in the most creative and compassionate and constructive way possible. And
Yeah.
there's an art to critiquing. And I think a lot of photographers, they don't know how to critique because they've never been properly critiqued
Hmm.
themselves. And, I've posted photographs and had people make comments on the photo. And I'm like, I wasn't looking for feedback. I don't really care what you think of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's times where someone will give feedback and it's harsh, and I'm like, God, they're kind of right. And so just like that person on the photo walk, if there's some value in what they're saying, even if it's said in a mean and crappy way, if there's some value in it, take that nugget and apply it to future photographs, and then throw the rest away. Don't dwell on the negativity. Don't let that voice be the one that's in your head when you're making that next photograph.
Right.
So
Right.
important.
Right. Well, and this goes back to the idea of photography is an optional thing. And so if you're going to do it with all that baggage, then why are you doing it? I mean, well, let's sort of circle all the way back and answer our question. You said that you know what gives you joy
Mm-hmm.
in photography. What gives you joy?
What gives me joy in
Yeah.
photography?
Yeah. Yeah. Like what about this? If you could sort of condense it down, what makes you joyous or satisfied?
Honestly, Jeff, just being better than you. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I did not expect that. Excellent. Oh my God.
No, now I'm going to give you the real answer. Now I'm going to give you the real answer.
The answer is timing.
I think the answer is for me, the process of photography is more valuable than the photographs. And we've said this time and time again in this podcast. So for me, what brings me joy is trying something very difficult and pulling it off.
Hmm.
And there's that combination of skill, luck, planning, preparedness, gear. All of these things have to line up. And if I can get into a flow state, that's nice. That's really, really fun. But coming back with an image that was difficult to get and doing it well in the way that I had envisioned it brings me great joy.
Hmm.
Brings me great joy. And I think whether or not other people like it brings me a little bit of extra joy, but I consider that almost like the cherry on top of the sundae, right? It's
Yeah.
it's not what I'm going for, but it sure is nice when it happens, right? And
Yeah.
to be honest, there'll be times where I'll post that photo that I'm really proud of on Instagram and it gets a few likes, and then I post a photo that I took with my iPhone of my camera making the photo that I'm really proud of, and that gets 5 times more likes.
Yes.
And I go, wow, I can't hang my hat on I can't hang my hat on that. So
Yeah.
it's got to be intrinsic. It's got to be joy from
Hmm.
inside.
Yeah. Well, for me, since I knew you were about to
Hang on,
ask,
I'm sorry, Jeff. I'm sorry.
that's fine.
For some reason, my recording just stopped. I must have bumped something. Okay, let's see if I can get it recording. Okay, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry, it just stopped for a second, but I caught it right as it did it. All right, go for
Okay.
it.
All right. So for me, since I know you were just about to ask, what brings me joy?
Absolutely, it's right on the tip of my tongue.
This podcast is basically just a long series of leading questions. That's all we do.
It's all it is. It's
That's
all it
all it
is.
is. Uh, for me, it is getting to that point where I make an image. I I mentioned this a little bit before. Getting to that point where I make an image and I know there's something good about that image. When I think back about some of the favorite images that I've taken of the last few years, there's one that I took, gosh, maybe 4 years ago now,
Mm-hmm.
but it was at sunset. It was at a beach. I found this great little angle of rocks and water flowing. I'll send you the image. We'll put it in the show notes.
Cool.
And it, it's not anything that is spectacular. It's not super grand, but I like the way it turned out. B, it did take me quite a bit of work. I worked that scene for quite a while because the sun was going down right in the right spot. And so
Mm-hmm.
like it definitely took work. But I knew that that the work was paying off and that what I was getting was good. And that even though I didn't know like which particular frame was good, there was something in there. And
Right.
also the experience. I was camping with family. I snuck away to go get this shot because it looked like the sunset was going to be good. When it was done, I went back and there was a campfire. We had s'mores. It was just like
Perfect.
like
Yeah.
like like all of that built into it. When I
Mm-hmm.
look at this photo, that all comes to me. And I had the same experience as you. I posted it and like inside I'm like, this is it, man. This is so good. And yeah, a few people liked it.
Yeah.
Um, a couple people were like, hey, like where is that? Because I don't recognize that. And at that section, I'm like, well, it was like this itty bitty tiny little corner of this beach that nobody goes to.
Yeah.
But you know what? That it still gives me joy. I look at that picture. I even made a print of it. It gives me joy knowing just all those things about it.
Yeah.
And moving forward, that I can do that again. Now, it might take me a long time to do it. It might take a lot of work for me to actually get out and go make a shot like that. But I know that the possibility is there. And so it's going to happen again. I don't know when, and I'm excited to go try, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, you put yourself in the situations to make good photos, and you might make good photos, you might not make good photos. And even sometimes when you don't make good photos, you have a good experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've
And it's
talked about that
all wrapped
before.
up in that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the core of why we do this podcast is about the process.
Yeah.
It's about finding joy and finding satisfaction in the process of making photos. It's not about the photos. And
Yeah.
if the photos turn out great and other people love it, like I said, it's a bonus. But you know, I go back to golf. You have a really great game of golf, and it's something that you really worked for years and years and years to get good at, and you go out and you have a really great game of golf. That's incredibly satisfying. If no one sees it, or you don't win a tournament and you don't make a dime doing it, it still was a great game of golf.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're talking about. So I want to finish by asking this question, Jeff.
Okay.
What if there's no joy in photography for you?
Hmm.
Yeah. What do you do with that?
You take up golf.
Yeah.
I
Probably
say
be.
that as someone, I say that as someone who, like I said, I did golf in the past, and I can't imagine really taking up golf again because I think it would frustrate me too much.
Right.
Well, obviously, one answer is put it behind you, do something else. You know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe if you are a visual person, painting is the option. Maybe you love photography, but you don't necessarily love taking pictures. Very,
Yeah.
very different disciplines. You know, I mean, photography is rich in history and culture and science and achievement. And like, there's so much to do with photography. And making those photos, that's a completely other thing.
Mm-hmm.
You had a really good analogy for that, and I've forgotten what it
It's
was.
it's music. I like to.
Music,
I
yes.
think better than the golf analogy. Music is closer to, and we've used this before, but music is closer to photography. Um, I am not musically talented at all. I mean, I can't sing. I can't play guitar. We have a piano. I can plink around on it, but it's not music. But I love music. I love lots of different kinds of music. I listen to music every day,
Uh-huh.
and I can't make it myself, but that doesn't mean I don't know what good music is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that if I were a musician, and there's a part of me that's like, someday I'm going to learn how to be a musician because I think I would
Sure.
enjoy it. But if I were a musician and there was no joy in making music, I would just start listening to music and just enjoy the music. I wouldn't be like, oh, I don't need to make it. I can just listen to it. And I think that there's a great truth in this, that if there's no joy in photography for you because maybe you're not finding the social success that you were hoping for with your photos, people aren't liking them as much as you'd like them to like them, you can still love photography. You can still appreciate photography. You can still love the gear. Let's say it's all about the gear for you. Maybe you want to be a camera collector, or someone who reviews camera gear and writes about camera gear. You don't have to be a good photographer to love the technology. You don't have to be a good photographer to love the process of making prints. I know a guy here in my neighborhood that owns a print shop. And I went and talked to him a few weeks ago, and I could tell the guy really, really loves to make canvas wraps and to make prints and make big prints. And he's also a photographer and he enjoys that. But his true love is making prints.
Hmm.
I don't have a big love of making prints. So I'm like, I'm sure glad you're here because you can help me with the thing
Yeah.
that I love, and then I can help you with the thing that you love. And so there's enough room, uh, there's enough room in this world for people who love photography. You don't have to be a photographer. God knows no one's out there screaming, is anyone here a photographer, right? So
Right.
I think that I think a lot of the people who are out there on photo walks and in camera clubs bringing other people down, those are people who aren't necessarily in love with photography,
Yeah.
with the process of making photos. Maybe they're just in love with looking at photos and being a critic of photos, and that's fine. There's a place for that. There's a place for that. So what a discombobulated topic that I think we maybe brought a tiny
Yeah.
degree of combobulation to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those squishy things. It will never be fully combobulated. But when you take little pieces apart and you look at them individually and then you bring them back into a whole, like that's kind of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
That's our mission for this podcast. But dare I say it, there's some joy in doing that too. In, you know, maybe you want to be someone who looks at all these pieces and you find the joy in finding, this technique works much better for this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is so much joy out there. And I say that as someone who, every once in a while, like I just get really down on photography. I will go and the conditions will be bad. And I ask myself, what am I doing here?
What was I
I'm a
thinking?
person, when I was in Italy, I sent you this text because I had a bad morning. I wrote about this on my website at jeffcarlson.com. We'll put
Mm-hmm.
a link in. Uh, I just had a bad experience shooting. And I was saying to myself, here I am, someone who has had moderate success as a photographer. I write about photography. I've written books about it. I communicate, I teach, like all of these things. And yet my brain and my hands and my body just could not make anything work that day. And I just had that moment of what am I doing here? And the reality is, yeah, that's going to happen. And there's so much more joy around it. And I also knew that, yeah, this was a bad time, but I was going to do something better later on.
Right.
And that brought me joy.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's out there. If you're feeling bad about photography or you don't know what to do in photography, maybe you've tried your hand at landscapes, you've tried your hand at portraits, maybe some product photography, and nothing really clicks. Go, photograph horses or something like
Right.
like there's so many different things. Be super creative, abstract, whatever. There's room for that, and there's room for joy uh, anywhere in there.
Yeah. I think our message is find that joy, right?
Find
Find
that
that
joy.
joy. And if you can't find it, maybe this isn't it.
Yeah.
But there should be joy in it. There should be joy in your photography. And I think that whatever led you to pick up that camera in the first place, go back to that and start there again. Sometimes we get off the trail, right? We get off the
Yeah.
trail and we're off in the trees somewhere and we realize, well, I don't know where we are anymore. You need to work your way back, retrace your steps, get back to where you know where you are, and go from there. And I think that I love that story about you in Italy because there's this perception that a lot of people have that, wow, experienced photographers that know what they're doing. Every time they go out, it's mai tais and roses, right? And it's just not. I mean, more often than
Yeah.
not, you're just going through the motions and you're hoping it works out. And there's just sometimes there's joy, sometimes there's not. And if you base your entire perception of this effort we call photography on your last excursion, that's a tenuous way to approach this. This is a long, long process and
Yeah.
it's fraught with mistakes and mishaps, but there's so much stuff. And I want to go back. We mentioned this before we started recording, but Joe McNally, when we had him on the show, one of my favorite episodes, by the way. If you haven't heard the episode with Joe McNally, go back and check it out.
So good.
He said that, sometimes when you get it, it's the wind in your sails, and it will carry you through a lot of days where you don't have the wind in your sails. So that's a horrible paraphrase, by the way. He said it much more eloquently. But I think that it's worth noting that photography is not easy, and when you have success, hang on to it and enjoy that joy and hold on
Mhm.
to that. So
Yep. And the last thing I will point out is also if you are running into situations where you're just frustrated and whatever, and this is going to sound so cheesy, I know, but
bring
give
the
yourself a
cheese,
break.
Jeff.
Bring the cheese.
Bring the cheese.
Give yourself a break
Mm-hmm.
because you know what? You may be doing much better than you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
I know a photographer, and every time he posts something, it's always cloaked in the, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but, you know, and my reaction is, look, like you're doing the work, you're trying, you're still engaged with this, you're learning.
Yeah.
That is so much a part of it. And I believe that at some point he will have some sort of a breakthrough where he, makes something that he really likes, or makes something that he realizes that, oh, you know what, I am actually kind of good at this, or at this one part of it.
Hmm.
And and he will find that. And
I hope
so,
so. I
don't
hope so.
don't knock yourself down
Yeah.
because yeah.
There's
Because
somebody
there's
I
plenty of other jerks out there who want to
gonna
do
say
it.
there's plenty of jerks out there to do it for you for free.
All right. I think we should probably land this. Uh,
Yep. Happy
yep,
anniversary, Jeff. Happy anniversary,
that's
folks.
right.
If
1 year. My God, how is it that we've been talking? I've already forgotten that we've been
we've been
doing this
talking long
for.
enough, you forgot it was a year.
We've been talking for an entire year. This episode has gone on for. We forgot to stop recording. So
Yeah.
anyway, um, lead us out here.
Lead
Where
us
can we
out.
find ourselves?
You can find all of our episodes from the past year on photocombobulate.com. And each episode has its own show notes page with lots of extra information, links to photos. We do a video version of each of these. So if you want to see what we look like as we gesticulate, it's might be worth your while to head over to YouTube and check that out. We have a link to those videos on each of those shows pages on our website. You can also find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram and all those places under Photocombobulate. We're the only Photocombobulate out there, so please find us.
Yes.
And subscribe, please. Whatever podcast app you use, we would love it if you'd subscribe, and we'd really appreciate it. Now that we've been at this a year, it'd be great if we could get some reviews coming in. So please write a review of the show and stay in touch. You can always reach us through photocombobulate.com. There's a contact us page. If you've got an idea for an episode, we'd love to hear it. If you've got questions you'd like us to answer, we'll do our best. All right. So photocombobulate.com.
And also linked there are our personal Instagram accounts, various ways that you can also reach us on Twitter and Instagram, like DM us a message. We love answering questions, and get in touch, tell your friends, subscribe, and find some joy out there. It's there.
That's right.
Believe
It's
us.
out there. It's right out there.
Out there, man. It's like right out there.
It's just right out there. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.